I felt that going into Zhilei Zhang against Joseph Parker, that could actually turn out the way that Deontay Wilder versus Joseph Parker was supposed to go. In that Deontay Wilder was quite withdrawn in terms of his output of his right hand in particular. And comparatively, I thought that Zhilei Zhang would be less gun-shy in that respect, more willing to pull the trigger as and when necessary. But as it transpired, it wasn't too dissimilar a fight outside of the knockdowns. Zhilei Zhang quite withdrawn. I think he was looking to keep one eye on his gas tank, so to speak, and see whether over the duration of 12 rounds, not 10, of 12 rounds, whether his gas tank would hold up. And I think when you look at the Filip Hrgović fight, the Jerry Forrest fight obviously had that caveat of dehydration. There was always that playing in the back of his mind. The seed had been planted beforehand, and so on that basis, Zhilei Zhang prioritized energy conservation more so than output efficiency over the course of 12 rounds. And his output was quite balanced throughout. There wasn't really a wilting as such that we saw in the Forrest fight, but there was the caveat I just explained about that. And the other one being the Filip Hrgović fight, which was arguably one of two halves. Early on, Zhang, but then Hrgović compensated for that later on, banking the rounds and lost a decision, which was subjective in either direction. Now, as for Joseph Parker, I felt that what he's done is he's a lot more comfortable in the pocket now. And ultimately, he did pay the price for that twice. The second knockdown more so because that was with a lead hand. It wasn't necessarily a cross that he was being lined up for. And it was a little bit hard to see in the sense that he was angling away and it caught him at an angle on the back of the head. But in either event, I felt that Parker is more technically polished as a fighter. However, I don't feel that either Zhilei Zhang or Joseph Parker put that silver lining, so to speak, that was required for them to cement themselves in that elite fraternity at heavyweight. The silver lining that Usyk put between himself and AJ, or AJ just put between himself and Otto Wallin or Francis Ngannou, there wasn't quite that silver lining. And like I said, I thought that this was going to go the way that Wilder versus Parker should have gone on paper, according to most people and what they expected to happen. But it was quite similar in the sense that Zhang was relatively withdrawn over the course of 12 rounds, and he wasn't as withdrawn as as withdrawn as Deontay Wilder. He did let his left hand go, but still quite withdrawn. And obviously Parker played a part in that with his tactics that he had success with. I don't think there's any escaping that fact either. But at the same time, I don't think that we can just discount the idea that it was all Parker and that Zhang didn't have any say in that whatsoever. I felt that Zhang was voluntarily holding back at times for the reasons I discussed earlier about wanting to keep an eye on the battery, so to speak. But Parker, one thing that he did was he kept dipping his head on the outside. And that was a little bit peculiar because if you look at it like this, Joseph Parker behind that guard was dipping on the outside this way. And that was in line for Zhilei Zhang's left cross as a southpaw. And ultimately, Parker paid the price for that in the third round when he got dropped. But it was something that surprised me in the sense that Parker was trying to bait him quite clearly. And he caught him about 3 or 4 times in the fight, if memory serves, very well with counter shots. But it was peculiar to see because Parker was trying to bait him out, but putting himself in a more than what was necessary position to do so. His head was beyond his lead foot at times, and I felt that not just trying to bait out that left hand, but generally Joseph Parker's head going beyond his lead foot with the guard down too, could be a potential recipe for disaster going forward. And perhaps a few years ago against Deontay Wilder, that may have been the outcome, but he did put a silver lining between himself and Deontay Wilder, and he's definitely earned his place, so to speak, in that elite conversation at the very minimum, Whether he's cemented himself or not is very much down to your interpretation. I feel he has now, although not quite that solid elite silver lining that was necessary. I didn't necessarily see a fantastic display from either man in that respect. I think as a neutral, it's also important to point out that I was looking for specific things going into this fight too. I wanted to see Joseph Parker build on those rigid fundamentals he was doing in the Deontay Wilder fight, using those tactics, the Kronk style. And with Zhang, I was looking for him to engineer ways, similar to how he did against Joe Joyce, engineer ways, whether that be with shoulder control or waist control coming off the clinch, to engineer favourable openings. And I felt that neither of them necessarily lived up to expectations in that respect. And as far as scoring goes, I gave it to Parker, but I do see why people had it as close as they did in that respect, because I think that if you look at what Zhang was doing, he wasn't throwing a lot of output, and even with that output, and not a lot of it was landing flush, but it was having a visible effect on Parker. Whereas Joseph Parker was actually making a lot of contact with leather and the forearms of Zhang. I think sometimes in boxing we misconstrue that as a scoring punch when it's not. The bicep, yes, but hitting gloves and forearms doesn't tend to be a thing, so to speak, in boxing judging. So very open to interpretation. Too subjective by nature, I think, a fight like that to say there was clearly one winner. I felt there was, in the sense that I had Parker up by around about 3 rounds, even with the knockdowns, but that's because I didn't look at it from the lens of what Zhang was doing, significantly outweighing the fact that Parker was hitting a lot of leather and forearms, because I felt that Parker did get away some very short shots as well, more so with the lead uppercut specifically. I think short shots is a bit too vague, actually. Lead uppercuts and lead hooks in close proximity. They're very cute shots, just in the ranges between ranges, like at short to mid-range. So that was the rationale for my basis for scoring the fight. But yeah, I don't think either put that silver lining that was necessary to cement themselves in that elite conversation at the very, very top end. But as I said before, I felt that the winner of this fight would position themselves at the very worst as the number 4 in the division, and I stand by that. So on that basis, I have Joseph Parker in my top 4 now, and should Zhang choose to go down the rematch route, which there is a clause with Joseph Parker, then be curious to see the rematch. I think Zhang will probably let his hands go more, and Joseph Parker, I presume Andy Lee will pick up on it, won't have his head as much over the lead foot with a low guard as well. I think they'll both look at various things they did and look to tweak those up so they're a little bit more polished for the next outing. But on that note, those are my thoughts on Zhang Parker mainly. There wasn't a lot to tactically dissect, if truth be told, outside of what I've explained in this video. So I didn't just want to talk for the sake of talking, do you know what I mean? Unless there's any substance behind what's being said, I don't want to make a video about it. So on that note, I think that's just about covered everything I wanted to say. And let's discuss below. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions that you'd like me to answer for you in future videos or the extended breakdowns, just tweet them over to me. That's at ElusiveRaf on Twitter. If you guys want to see my daily fight analysis uploads, I upload those every day to Instagram, and that's at Elusive 2.0 on Instagram.